He only did the right thing. He saw his boss, the CEO of the entire corporation, collapsing in the polished marble lobby, alone and vulnerable after a brutal corporate gala. He drove her home, or tried to, when she was too intoxicated to form a sentence. But the next morning, when Diana Sterling, a woman who commanded boardrooms and terrified competitors, woke up in his daughter's bedroom wearing clothes that weren't hers, one phone call could change everything. For Marcus Thorne, a black man, a single father, a maintenance worker trying to remain invisible in a world that often saw him as a threat, there was no room for misunderstanding. So what did she do that morning, her hand trembling as she dialed her lawyer? And why did that single terrified phone call almost destroy the quiet, honorable life he had worked so hard to build? The hum of the floor polisher was a familiar lullaby, a mechanical heartbeat that echoed through the cavernous, empty atrium of Sterling Automotive Technologies. It was 11:30 p.m. Marcus Thorne moved with an economy of motion born from years of practice, his body a shadow gliding over the gleaming Italian marble. He was a ghost in the machine, the man who made the pristine world of high-tech innovation spotless for the brilliant minds who would arrive at dawn. He preferred it this way. Invisibility was a form of armor. It was safety. He had a system. Floors first, then the glass walls of the conference rooms, then the executive washrooms. By 2 a.m., he would be done. By 2:30, he'd be home. He would check on his daughter, Maya, her small form a peaceful lump under a unicorn-themed duvet. He would sit at their small kitchen table, maybe sketch out an idea in his old engineering notebook, a habit he couldn't break, and then catch a few hours of sleep before the morning rush of getting Maya ready for school. It was a life built on precision and quiet repetition, a fortress of routine he'd constructed around the gaping hole his wife Angela's passing had left 3 years ago. Tonight was different. The annual Sterling Innovation Gala had just ended. The lingering scent of expensive perfume and champagne hung in the air, a ghostly party Marcus was now paid to erase. He found a single, discarded stiletto near the base of the massive, chrome sculpture that dominated the lobby, a stylized depiction of a magnetic coil. He picked it up, its delicate heel surprisingly heavy, and placed it in his lost and found bin. He imagined the woman who wore it, laughing, dancing, oblivious to the man who would later clean up her confetti. That's when he heard the sound, a soft thud, followed by a choked sob, coming from the direction of the main entrance. Marcus froze, his hand tightening on the handle of the polisher. His first instinct, honed by a lifetime of navigating a world that was not always kind, was to ignore it. Trouble was not his business. His business was flaws. His business was getting home to Maya. But the sob came again, laced with a raw, splintered pain that cut through his practiced detachment. It was the sound of a heart breaking. He knew that sound intimately. He'd made it himself, crumpled on a hospital floor. He turned off the polisher. The silence that rushed in was suddenly immense, and the sound of distress was now stark and undeniable. He walked slowly, cautiously, toward the revolving glass doors. And there, slumped against the cool metal frame, was Diana Sterling, the CEO, the iron-willed woman whose portrait hung in the lobby, her expression a formidable blend of intelligence and ambition. But the woman on the floor was not the one in the portrait. Her couture gown was slightly askew, a dark stain, spilled wine, he guessed, marring the silver silk. Her hair, usually swept into an impeccable chignon, had come partially undone, framing a face pale and streaked with tears. Her phone lay shattered on the floor beside her. Marcus's entire body tensed. This was not just trouble. This was the epicenter of it. A black maintenance worker and the drunk, distraught, white CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, alone, late at night. Every alarm bell in his head, conditioned by news headlines and his father's weary warnings, was screaming. Walk away. Pretend you saw nothing. Go back to your polisher. This is not your problem. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, and the life he'd so carefully built for Maya could shatter just like that phone on the floor. He could call security. That was the protocol. But he knew the security team. They were good men, but they were gossips. A story like this, the great Diana Sterling, a wreck in the lobby, would be all over the building by morning. It felt cruel, a violation of her momentary, human weakness. He took a tentative step forward. "Ma'am, Ms. Sterling." Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes, usually a sharp, piercing blue, were clouded and unfocused. He sold it," she slurred, her voice thick with alcohol and grief. "Right from under me. Garrett, that son of a—" She couldn't finish the sentence, dissolving into another wave of quiet, desperate sobs. Marcus understood fragments. Garrett was Garrett Vance, her COO, a man with a smile as polished and empty as the floors Marcus cleaned. He'd seen them in boardrooms, their dynamic a study in forced cordiality. Something had happened. A betrayal. And it had broken her. He knelt down, keeping a respectful distance. "Messiah Sterling, you're not safe here. Can I call someone for you? A car service? A friend?" She fumbled for her broken phone, her fingers clumsy. "Broke. It's all broken." She looked up at him, and for a second a flicker of awareness crossed her face. A flicker of fear. She saw a large man, a stranger, kneeling over her. She tried to push herself up, to shrink away. "I work here," Marcus said quickly, his voice calm and steady. He pointed to the Sterling maintenance patch on his uniform. "I'm Marcus Thorne. I'm just cleaning. I heard you. I want to help." The fear in her eyes softened, replaced by a wave of exhaustion. She sagged back against the door. "Can't go home. He might be there. Can't think." Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't leave her here. It wasn't in him. It wasn't what Angela would have wanted. Angela, who always saw the person, not the position. "Everyone's just trying to make it through the day, Mark," she used to say. "Be the person who makes it a little easier, not harder." "Okay," he said, making a decision that felt both necessary and monumentally stupid. "Okay, I can give you a ride. Somewhere safe. A hotel?" She shook her head vaguely. "No press, no anything." The weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. There was only one other option. It was a terrible, dangerous, idiotic option. But it was also the only humane one he could see. "My car is right outside. I can take you somewhere you can rest for a few hours. Somewhere no one will find you." He helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, leaning heavily on him. The contact was electric with risk. He was acutely aware of every security camera he passed as he guided her toward the employee exit, his arm firmly around her waist only to keep her from falling. He could feel the invisible eyes of the world on him, judging him, misinterpreting his every move. His car, a 15-year-old but immaculately maintained sedan, sat under the lonely sodium glare of the employee parking lot. It was his pride and joy, the engine a testament to his past life as a senior automotive systems engineer, a life he'd given up to have more time, more stability for Maya after Angela got sick. He'd rebuilt this engine with his own hands. It ran smoother than most new cars. As he opened the passenger door for Diana, she looked at the car, then back at him, a flicker of her usual imperious nature surfacing through the alcoholic haze. "This thing," she mumbled, a note of disdain in her voice. "This car is worthless." The words, careless and cruel, stung more than he expected. Worthless. It was how the world so often saw him. The invisible man with his worthless car, his worthless life. He bit back a retort. She was drunk. She was hurting. It wasn't about him. "It'll get you there safely," he said, his voice tight. "That's all that matters." He eased her into the seat and buckled her seatbelt as if she were a child. As he drove away from the gleaming steel and glass tower of Sterling Automotive, heading toward his modest neighborhood in a different part of the city, he had no idea where he was taking her. He just knew he was driving straight into a storm, and the only thing he could do was hold the wheel steady and pray he'd make it through to the other side. The drive was a tense 20-minute exercise in hyper-awareness. Diana Sterling drifted in and out of a restless, murmuring sleep in the passenger seat. Marcus kept the radio off, the silence broken only by her occasional sighs and the quiet, reassuring thrum of the engine he knew so well. He glanced at her. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, she looked younger, stripped of her corporate armor. Just a woman who had been wounded. His internal GPS was in turmoil. A hotel was out. He didn't have the money for a decent one, and a cheap motel was an even worse idea. Calling her friend was impossible without a working phone or a number. His mind circled back to the one, terrifyingly simple solution: his house, his sanctuary, Maya's home. It felt like a desecration, bringing this world of corporate intrigue and drunken despair into the small, peaceful space he and Maya shared. But what was the alternative? Leave her in his car to sleep it off, drop her on a park bench. Every option felt wrong, but taking her home felt the most dangerous. He thought of his neighbors, of the questions they might ask. He thought of what would happen if someone saw her leaving in the morning, a black man, his drunk white boss, in his house. The words from the potential headline wrote themselves in his mind. He felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. It didn't matter what actually happened. Perception was reality, and for a man like him, there was no benefit of the doubt. His character was the only currency he had, and he was about to put it all on the line. He pulled up to his small, neat house on a quiet tree-lined street. The porch light was on, a welcoming beacon he always left on for himself. He looked at Diana, now fast asleep, her head resting against the window. He could still turn back, drive her somewhere, anywhere else. But where? He thought of Maya. He thought of the lessons he was trying to teach her about kindness, about helping people who are down, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. How could he teach her those things if he wasn't willing to live them? His fear was about protecting Maya, but abandoning this woman felt like a betrayal of the very values he wanted to instill in his daughter. With a deep, resigned breath, he made his choice. He would be careful, meticulous. He would leave no room for misinterpretation. Getting her out of the car and into the house was a clumsy, nerve-wracking ordeal. She was a dead weight, and he was intensely conscious of the curtains of the houses around him. Imagining eyes peering out into the darkness, he managed to get her inside and shut the door, the click of the lock sounding like the sealing of his fate. His apartment was small but immaculate. Toys were in their designated bins, books were stacked neatly on shelves, and the faint scent of cinnamon from the oatmeal they'd had for breakfast still lingered in the air. It was a space that radiated warmth and order. He looked at Diana, then at his own small bedroom, then at the couch. None of it felt right. His room felt too intimate. The couch felt too exposed. Then his eyes fell on the door to Maya's room. It was the most innocent, unimpeachable space in the house. It was a room filled with unicorn drawings, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and the unassailable goodness of his child. No one could misconstrue him putting her there. It was a sanctuary. He guided her into Maya's room, the absurdity of the situation hitting him full force. The CEO of Sterling Automotive, a titan of industry, was about to sleep in a twin bed surrounded by stuffed animals. He gently sat her down on the edge of the bed. The wine stain on her dress was large and damp. He couldn't let her sleep like that. He went to his own dresser and pulled out a clean, folded t-shirt. It was one of Angela's. A simple, soft grey cotton shirt he'd kept, not for the memory, but for the comfort of its familiarity. He hesitated for a long moment. The shirt clutched in his hand. It felt like crossing another line. But the alternative, letting her sleep in a soiled, uncomfortable gown, felt unkind. He walked back into Maya's room and placed the folded shirt on the nightstand, next to a lamp shaped like a friendly monster. He also placed a glass of water there. "Ms. Sterling," he said softly, "you can change into this. It's clean. Your dress is... you should take it off." He backed away immediately, turning toward the door. "I'll be right outside. I'm going to sleep on the couch. You can lock the door if you want." He wasn't sure if she heard him or understood, but he had to say it. He had to establish the boundaries, for her and for his own peace of mind. He closed the door almost all the way, leaving it open just a crack, and went to the living room. The couch was lumpy, but he barely noticed. His mind was a whirlwind of anxiety. He sat in the dark, listening. He heard some fumbling, a soft rustle of fabric. Then, a click. She had locked the door. A small measure of relief washed over him. It was a good sign. It was proof. He looked at the clock on the cable box, 1:45 a.m., and then a jolt of pure cold panic shot through him, far worse than anything he'd felt all night. He'd forgotten. In the chaos of the evening, the single most important event of the week had been wiped from his mind. Maya's school play. He scrambled for his phone, his heart pounding. The play was today. Friday, at 6 p.m. It was now Saturday morning. He had missed it. He had promised her he would be in the front row. He had promised. Keeping promises to his little girl was the bedrock of his entire existence. It was the one thing he refused to compromise on. After losing her mother, his presence was the only constant she had, and he had failed her. A wave of self-loathing washed over him. For what? To play the Good Samaritan for a woman who looked at his car and called it worthless. A woman who would wake up tomorrow and likely not even remember his name. He buried his face in his hands, the rough fabric of the couch scratching against his skin. He had sacrificed the one thing that was truly priceless, a promise to his daughter, for a principle that might very well destroy him. He thought of Maya, standing on that stage, scanning the audience for his face. He imagined her smile faltering, her shoulders slumping when she couldn't find him. The image was a physical blow. He felt a sob rising in his own throat, a mirror of the one he'd heard from Diana just a few hours ago. He needed to know she was okay. He scrolled through his contacts and found Mrs. Patterson, his elderly neighbor, his emergency backup, his angel. He'd asked her to be on standby, just in case work ran late, but he'd never imagined this. He dialed her number, praying she was awake. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and alert. "Marcus, is everything all right, dear? It's late." "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry to call. Is Maya with you?" he asked, his voice strained. "Of course she is, bless her heart. Fast asleep on my sofa. She didn't want to go home without you." There was a pause. "You missed the play, Marcus." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact, which somehow made it worse. "I know," he whispered, shame burning in his chest. "I am so sorry. Something happened at work. I couldn't get away." Was she very upset?" "She was disappointed," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "She looked for you, but she's a trooper, that one. She said, 'Daddy's probably helping someone. He's like a superhero, but his job is cleaning.' She went on and did her part beautifully. She was a shining star." Marcus felt a crack appear in the armor of his guilt. Daddy's probably helping someone. Out of the mouths of babes. Maya, with her innocent wisdom, had given him a grace he didn't feel he deserved. "I did record it for you," Mrs. Patterson added. "The whole thing, on my little tablet. I'll bring her and the tablet over in the morning, around 9. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I don't know what I'd do without you." "We all need somebody, Marcus. Now you get some rest. You sound like you've been through the ringer." He hung up the phone, the weight on his chest lifting just slightly, just enough to breathe. He had failed, but his daughter had forgiven him before he even had a chance to ask. Her faith in him was a fragile, precious thing, and he'd come dangerously close to breaking it. He decided against the couch. It felt wrong. He went to his own room, grabbed a spare pillow and a blanket, and went back to Maya's door. He lay down on the floor, his back against the wall, a silent, unmoving guard. It was the least he could do. He was in his daughter's home, if not her room. He was protecting the stranger inside, but he was also protecting his own integrity. He would sleep on the floor, outside the locked door. It was another piece of evidence, another testament to the truth, in case the morning brought accusations instead of understanding. As he drifted into a troubled sleep, he could only hope it would be enough. The first light of morning was a pale, grey wash filtering through the living room blinds when Marcus awoke. His neck was stiff, his back ached from the hard floor, but his mind was instantly, sharply alert. The house was silent, too silent. He listened for any sound from Maya's room, but heard nothing. He got up slowly, folding the blanket and placing it on a nearby armchair. He looked at the closed locked door. Behind it slept a woman who held his future in her hands. He felt a fresh wave of anxiety. What would she remember? How would she react? He was a stranger. This was his house. The optics were a nightmare. He went to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee, the familiar ritual, a small anchor in the churning sea of his thoughts. He needed to be ready. He needed to have a calm, clear explanation. No excuses, just the simple, unvarnished truth. It was then that he heard it. A voice. A muffled, high-pitched voice from behind Maya's door. Diana was awake, and she was on the phone. Marcus froze, his hand hovering over the coffee maker. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the sound carried in the small, quiet apartment. Her voice was raw, laced with a tremor of fear and confusion. "Claire, it's me. I don't know where I am." A long pause. Marcus's blood ran cold. He could imagine the questions on the other end of the line. "No, I don't remember anything after the gala. Not really. I woke up in a room. It's a kid's room. There are drawings on the wall. Unicorns." Her voice cracked. "Claire, I'm in someone's house. A man's house." Marcus stood perfectly still, his back pressed against the kitchen wall. He could feel the trap springing shut. He knew how this would play out. He had seen this story 100 times. It was the foundation of his deepest fears. "I'm wearing clothes that aren't mine," she continued, her voice rising in panic. "A t-shirt. I don't remember changing. Oh God, Claire, what happened?" He closed his eyes. It didn't matter that he had slept on the floor. It didn't matter that he had left the door open for her to lock. It didn't matter that he had treated her with nothing but respect. All that mattered were the ingredients of the story. A powerful, vulnerable white woman, a black man of a lower class, a strange house, a memory gap. It was a recipe for disaster. His disaster. "Call the police," the voice on the other end must have said, because Diana's next words were a choked, I don't know. He might still be here." He heard a sharp, authoritative voice, Claire's, he presumed, coming faintly through the phone. It was the voice of someone used to taking charge, someone who saw threats and neutralized them. Marcus felt his future, his custody of Maya, his very freedom, hanging by a single, fraying thread. The world he had so carefully constructed was about to be burned to the ground because he had tried to do the right thing. He thought about knocking on the door, about trying to explain, but he knew it was too late. Anything he said now would sound like a desperate lie. All he could do was wait for the sirens. Inside the room, Diana Sterling was trembling, the phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Her friend Claire, a top corporate lawyer, was a voice of cold, calculated fury in her ear. "Diana, do not talk to him. Do not open the door. Tell me the address if you can find it. I'm sending a car. and I'm calling the police. We're going to have him arrested for kidnapping, for assault." "Assault," Diana whispered, the word hanging in the air. Her mind was a fog, a whirlwind of shame and fear. She tried to piece together the night, the gala, the bitter taste of betrayal as she saw the term sheet Garrett had been circulating. The sting of champagne, then another and another. The lobby, a man's voice, calm and deep. A car. But it was all fractured, like a broken mirror. But as Claire spoke of police and assault, something else began to surface. A competing narrative. She looked around the room. Really looked this time. The drawings on the wall were taped up with care, signed in a child's loopy cursive. Maya, age 9. A row of well-loved stuffed animals sat on a shelf, their button eyes seeming to watch her without judgment. The lamp on the nightstand was shaped like a smiling monster. This wasn't a predator's lair. This was a child's sanctuary. Her eyes fell on the glass of water on the nightstand. Then, tucked partially under it, she saw a piece of paper, a folded note. Her hands shaking, she picked it up and opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise. "Miss Sterling, you were unwell. I brought you here so you could be safe. This is my daughter's room. I slept in the living room. The front door is unlocked. My name is Marcus Thorne. I work in maintenance at Sterling. I hope you are feeling better." She read the note once, then twice. I slept in the living room. She looked down at the floor by the door. She hadn't noticed it before, but there was a faint indentation in the carpet, the size of a pillow. "Diana, are you listening to me?" Claire's voice was sharp, pulling her from her thoughts. "The police are on their way." "Wait," Diana said, her own voice barely a whisper. "Claire, wait. Stop." "Stop, Diana, you could be in serious danger." "No," Diana said, a little stronger this time. "I don't think I am." Her memory was starting to clear, the fog beginning to lift. She remembered slumping in the lobby, a man in a uniform kneeling beside her, his voice calm and respectful. "Can I call someone for you?" She remembered his car, the quiet hum of a well-cared-for engine, and she remembered her own drunken, cruel words. "This car is worthless." A hot flush of shame washed over her. She remembered him helping her into the house. She remembered him guiding her to this room. And she remembered him placing the clean T-shirt on the nightstand and backing away. "You can lock the door if you want." And she had. She remembered the distinct click of the lock. "Claire," Diana said, her voice changing, becoming clearer, steadier. "Call it off. Call off the police. Right now." "What? Why? What's going on?" "Nothing happened," Diana said, the truth of it settling in her bones with an undeniable certainty. "He helped me. He helped me when I was a mess and no one else was there. He brought me to his home because I had nowhere else to go." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Diana, you don't know that. You were intoxicated. You can't trust your memory." "I trust this," Diana said, looking around the little room, at the evidence of a life lived with care and love. "He put me in his child's bedroom. He slept on the floor outside the door. He missed his daughter's school play to make sure I was safe." A fresh wave of shame, sharp and profound, pierced through her. He had sacrificed something important for her, a complete stranger who had insulted him. Before Claire could argue further, there was a soft knock at the front door. Diana's heart leaped into her throat. Then she heard it. The key in the lock, the door opening, and a child's bright, happy voice. "Daddy, we're home. Mrs. Patterson made waffles." And then a little girl with big, curious brown eyes and 2 bright pink ribbons in her hair appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, holding the hand of an elderly woman. The girl stopped short when she saw Diana sitting on her bed. She didn't look scared. She looked interested. "Hello," the little girl said, her voice clear as a bell. Diana found her own voice. "Hello." The girl, Maya, tilted her head. Are you the person Daddy was helping? Your eyes are sad, like the kind where you smile but your eyes don't. Out of the mouths of babes. The simple, profound observation landed with more force than any of Claire's accusations. This child saw her, not as a CEO, not as a victim, but as a sad person. Diana lowered the phone. Claire, I have to go. Don't do anything. I'll call you back. She hung up before her friend could protest. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly. Well, good morning. I was just bringing this little chatterbox home, and I have the video of the play for you, Marcus. She looked past Diana to where Marcus was now standing, frozen in the hallway, his face a mask of weary tension. He had heard everything. The arrival of his daughter, the conversation, the shift in Diana's tone. He felt the weight on his chest, the one that had been crushing him all night, begin to lift. Just slightly. Just enough to breathe. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Diana stood up, acutely aware that she was in a stranger's home, wearing a dead woman's t-shirt, standing in front of the man whose life she had almost ruined. The shame was a physical presence, a heavy cloak she couldn't shrug off. She looked at Marcus, at the exhaustion etched around his eyes, and understood for the first time the true depth of the risk he had taken for her. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a gamble with his entire life. I am so sorry, she said, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. For everything. The things I said. The trouble I've caused. Marcus just nodded, his expression unreadable. He was still processing the near miss, the bullet he had dodged not by his own actions, but by a stroke of luck. The note, the locked door, Maya's timely arrival. Maya, oblivious to the adult tension, walked over to Diana and looked at the t-shirt she was wearing. That was Mommy's, she said, not with sadness, but with a simple matter-of-factness. Daddy keeps them because they smell like her. But it's okay you're wearing it. You look like you needed a hug, and her shirts give good hugs. The innocent, devastating comment shattered the last of Diana's composure. A tear she hadn't realized she was holding back slipped down her cheek. A shirt that gave good hugs. This man, this stranger, had offered her a piece of his most precious memories as a shield against the cold. Mrs. Patterson, sensing the emotional overload, gently took Maya's hand. All right, my little star, let's go see if there are any waffles left for your dad. Why don't you two adults have a chat? She steered Maya toward the kitchen, leaving Marcus and Diana alone in the hallway between the living room and the child's bedroom. The silence stretched between them, no longer fraught with fear, but heavy with unspoken truths. Your daughter, Diana began, her voice thick. She's incredible. She's her mother's daughter, Marcus said quietly. It was the highest compliment he could pay. I made a phone call, Diana confessed, needing to lay all the cards on the table. To my lawyer, I was scared. I didn't remember. I thought... I know what you thought. Marcus cut in, his voice flat, devoid of accusation. I heard. It's what anyone would think. He looked her directly in the eye, and for the first time, she saw past the maintenance uniform to the man beneath. She saw a profound weariness, the exhaustion of a man who has spent his life navigating a minefield. It's what I was afraid of all night. She wanted to call the police, Diana admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I told her no. I told her what you did, that you missed your daughter's play for me. The mention of the play brought a fresh wave of pain to Marcus's face. Mrs. Patterson recorded it, he said, more to himself than to her. I cost you that, Diana said. I'm a stranger. I was drunk and rude to you, and I cost you a memory with your daughter. You were in trouble, he said simply, as if that explained everything. No one else was there. It was this simple, unshakable integrity that undid her. In her world, every action had an angle, every favor a price. Help was transactional. But Marcus Thorne operated on a different currency altogether, human decency. A currency her world had devalued into worthlessness. "I need to get out of your way," she said, suddenly feeling like an intruder again. "I'll call a car." "I can drive you," he offered, the kindness in the gesture almost painful. "No," she said firmly. "You've done more than enough. You need to be with your daughter. You need to watch her play." She looked around the apartment, at the neat, ordered life he had built. Her eyes landed on a small desk in the corner of the living room. It was tidy, except for a single, open notebook. It was filled with complex drawings, equations, and notes. They weren't doodles. They were schematics, highly detailed, incredibly sophisticated technical drawings. Curiosity piqued, she took a step closer. The drawings depicted a new type of regenerative braking system, one that used a hybrid magnetic and kinetic energy recovery mechanism. It was elegant, innovative, and years ahead of anything her own R&D department was working on. In fact, it was a solution to the very problem that had been plaguing their flagship EV model, a problem that Garrett Vance had sworn was unsolvable, a problem that was costing the company millions. "What is this?" she asked, pointing to the notebook, her voice filled with a new kind of awe. Marcus looked over, a faint flush rising on his cheeks. He quickly moved to close the notebook. "It's nothing, just an old hobby. I like to tinker." Tinker. Diana stepped closer, her CEO instincts kicking in, overriding her personal shame. "This isn't tinkering. This is genius. The way you've solved the thermal degradation issue, the efficiency of the energy recapture. Who are you?" The question was no longer about his name or his job. It was about the brilliant mind that was hiding in plain sight, pushing a floor polisher. Marcus hesitated, then sighed. The secret was so old, so buried, it felt like it belonged to another man. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said again. "Before I worked in maintenance, I was a senior systems engineer at McLeish Automotive. I led the powertrain design team for their concept hybrid." Diana stared at him, stunned. McLeish's concept hybrid had been revolutionary a decade ago. Its powertrain was still the stuff of industry legend, studied in engineering schools. The lead designer had vanished from the industry shortly after its debut. People said he'd been poached by a secretive tech giant, or had burned out. No one imagined he was polishing floors at a rival company. "You're that Marcus Thorne," she breathed. "What are you doing here? Why are you—" She gestured vaguely at his uniform, at the quiet simplicity of his life. The engine had roared. Not the one in his car, but the one in his mind. The multi-billion-dollar engine of a genius-level intellect that he had willingly, quietly, shut down. "My wife, Angela, got sick," he explained, his voice softening as he said her name. "The job at McLeish was 80 hours a week, constant travel. I couldn't be there for her. I couldn't be the husband she needed. After she passed, I needed to be the father Maya needed. This job, it has set hours. No travel, no stress. It lets me be here for her. Every morning, every night. That's worth more than any title or any salary." Diana finally understood. He hadn't fallen from grace. He had chosen it. He had sacrificed a brilliant career, a life of prestige and wealth, for love and fatherhood. He had traded his own visibility for his daughter's stability. And last night, he had been willing to risk that hard-won stability for a stranger. The scale of her own life, her own problems, suddenly seemed small and petty. Her battle with Garrett was about ego and money. Marcus's battles were about love, integrity, and survival. She had called his car worthless, but it was she who had lost sight of what had true value. "Marcus," she said, her voice filled with a respect that bordered on reverence. "The work in this notebook, it could solve a $2 billion problem for my company." He shrugged, a small, sad smile on his face. "It's just an idea. I have them all the time. It's harder to turn my brain off than it is to let it run." "You shouldn't have to turn it off," she said, a fierce conviction rising in her. "A mind like yours shouldn't be polishing floors." "My daughter needs me more than your company needs a new braking system," he said, his priorities clear and unshakable. "What if," Diana said, an idea forming, a way to right this wrong, not with a simple handout, but with a real solution. "What if you could have both?" Marcus watched her, his expression wary. He'd learned to be suspicious of grand offers, of people from her world who believed every problem could be solved with a checkbook. His dignity was not for sale. "I'm not looking for charity, Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice firming. "This isn't charity," she countered, her eyes alight with purpose. "This is a business proposition, and a long overdue apology." The car that arrived for Diana was a sleek black town car, the kind she was used to. As she got in, she turned back to Marcus, who was standing on his porch. Maya was now beside him, holding his hand, watching the fancy car with wide eyes. "Thank you, Marcus," Diana said, and this time the words were imbued with a universe of meaning. "For everything." He just gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement. As the car pulled away, Diana made 2 phone calls. The first was to her lawyer, Claire. "Claire, it's me," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative once more, but with a new undercurrent of humility. "Cancel my morning, and I need you to draw up a consulting contract, a very specific one. Top-tier pay, but strictly limited hours, 20 hours a week max, no travel. All work can be done remotely. I want it ready by noon." "A consulting contract? For whom?" Claire asked, baffled. "For the man who's about to save our EV division," Diana said. "His name is Marcus Thorne." Her second call was to the head of HR. "Frank," she said, "I need the personnel file for a maintenance worker named Marcus Thorne, and I want to know who his direct supervisor is. I have a feeling we have a management issue that needs to be addressed. Immediately." When she got back to her own sterile, empty penthouse apartment, the first thing she did was walk past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and straight to her closet. She pulled off the clothes she'd put on at Marcus's house, her own slacks and blouse that a driver had brought her, and looked at the soft grey t-shirt she had folded and placed on her bed. A shirt that gives good hugs. She picked it up. It smelled faintly of him, of his clean, simple home. And maybe, just maybe, she could still smell the faintest trace of a woman named Angela. Meanwhile, back at the small house, Marcus sat on the couch with Maya nestled beside him. On the screen of Mrs. Patterson's tablet, a group of 9-year-olds dressed as trees and woodland creatures were singing slightly off-key. And then, one little girl, dressed as a firefly with a costume that blinked, stepped forward. It was Maya. She had a solo part. She took a deep breath, looked out at the audience, and her face fell for just a fraction of a second. She was looking for him. Marcus's heart clenched. He had done that to her. But then, Maya straightened her small shoulders, lifted her chin, and sang. Her voice was sweet and clear, filling the school auditorium, and, now, his small living room. She sang about sharing your light, about not being afraid of the dark. She sang with a confidence and grace that went far beyond her years. When the video ended, Maya looked up at him. "Did you like it, Daddy?" He pulled her into a fierce hug, burying his face in her hair. "I loved it, sweetheart. You were the brightest light on that whole stage. I am so, so proud of you." "It's okay you weren't there," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Mrs. Patterson said you were on a mission. Were you saving the sad lady?" He held her tighter. "Yeah, baby girl, I guess I was." On Monday morning, Marcus went to work at his usual pre-dawn hour. He expected things to be different, awkward, He expected whispers, strange looks, but the building was the same. The floors needed polishing, the glass needed cleaning. His supervisor, a gruff man named Sal, just grunted a "morning Thorn" and handed him his checklist. It was as if nothing had happened. He was wiping down the glass of the main boardroom when Sal came to find him, a confused look on his face. "Thorn, the CEO's office just called. They want to see you. Now." Marcus felt a familiar knot of dread. This was it. The other shoe was about to drop. Maybe her lawyer had convinced her. Maybe she'd had second thoughts. He wiped his hands on a rag, his heart beginning to pound again. He took the executive elevator to the top floor, a place he only ever went to clean. The CEO's assistant, a woman who usually looked right through him, stood up when he arrived. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Sterling will see you now." Mr. Thorne. She had never called him that before. He walked into Diana's office. It was vast, with a panoramic view of the city. Diana was standing by the window, but she turned to face him as he entered. She was dressed in her usual power suit, but her expression was different. The hard, impenetrable mask was gone. "Marcus, thank you for coming," she said. "You asked for me," he replied, his guard still up. "I did." She gestured to one of the chairs in front of her massive desk. "Please, sit." He remained standing. He was the maintenance man. He didn't sit in the CEO's office. Diana's face softened with understanding. "Marcus, please, as a friend." The word hung in the air. He slowly, hesitantly sat down. "I've spent the weekend thinking," she began, "about what you did, and about what I said, about your car, about everything." She took a deep breath. "I've built my life and my company on the idea of value. Market value, shareholder value, performance value. I assess everything and everyone by what they are worth. And I was wrong. Utterly, fundamentally wrong." She walked over to her desk and picked up a folder. "This is a consulting contract. It offers you a position as a senior innovation consultant, reporting directly to me. The work involves analyzing and improving our powertrain systems, starting with the schematics in your notebook. The hours are fixed at 20 per week. You can work from home. The salary is commensurate with the value you would be bringing to this company." She slid the folder across the desk. Marcus stared at it, not moving to pick it up. "I told you, I'm not looking for a handout." "Did you hear what I just said?" Diana's voice was firm, but not unkind. "This is not a handout. This is me, the CEO of this company, desperately trying to hire the best mind in the automotive industry. A mind I was too blind and arrogant to see when it was right in front of me. This is me trying to fix a $2 billion problem. I need you. The company needs you. But," she added, her voice softening, "I respect your priorities more. That's why the contract is written this way. Maya comes first. Your life comes first. This is just work." He finally reached out and opened the folder. He scanned the terms, his engineer's mind quickly processing the details. The salary was astronomical, more than he had made even at McLeish. The terms were exactly as she'd described. It was a golden ticket, but one that didn't require him to sell his soul. "What about my current job?" he asked, the practical question grounding him. "Your job as a maintenance worker for this company ended an hour ago," Diana said with a faint smile. "With a generous severance package and a glowing letter of recommendation, signed by me. Your supervisor, Sal, has been reassigned to a location where his lack of observational skills will be less of a liability. It seems he's been falsifying supply orders for years. Amazing what you find when you start looking." Marcus looked up from the contract, a slow smile finally breaking through his cautious exterior. It wasn't just about the money or the job. It was about the respect. She had seen him, truly seen him, and she was not just rewarding his talent, but protecting his dignity. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Diana, I accept." The next few months were a quiet revolution. Marcus set up a home office in his small spare room, the one that used to hold his tools. He worked during the hours Maya was at school, his mind roaring back to life, reveling in the complex problems he was born to solve. The ideas in his notebook became official patents, filed under his name. The regenerative braking system went from a schematic to a prototype with astonishing speed. He was a ghost in the machine no longer. He was its architect. But the biggest change wasn't the work. It was his presence. He was there to walk Maya to school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. He had time to help her with her homework, to build elaborate Lego castles, to just sit and listen to her talk about her day. He had shed the exhaustion that had been his constant companion for years. He was more present, more joyful than he had been since before Angela got sick. He and Diana developed an unlikely friendship. They spoke on the phone almost daily, their conversations shifting seamlessly from talk vectoring and battery chemistry to Maya's upcoming science fair project and the pressures of being a woman in a male-dominated industry. She learned about Angela, about the love they shared, and the quiet grief he still carried. He learned about the loneliness of her position, the constant betrayals she navigated. They were from different worlds, but they found common ground in their shared humanity. She never tried to fix his life with money again. Instead, she offered her presence. She attended Maya's science fair, listening with genuine interest as Maya explained her volcano made of baking soda and vinegar. She remembered his birthday and sent not an expensive gift, but a rare out-of-print book on engine design she'd had a specialist track down. One evening, a few months later, Marcus was at another school event. It was the spring concert. This time, he was not only there, but he was early, saving a seat in the front row. A few minutes before the concert began, someone slid into the seat next to him. It was Diana. She was dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a loose ponytail. She looked relaxed, happy. "Didn't want to miss the new performance," she said with a warm smile. "I saved you a seat," he replied, a comfortable ease between them that would have been unimaginable just a short time ago. As the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, Maya, once again dressed as a firefly, scanned the audience. This time, her eyes landed on her father immediately. A huge, radiant smile lit up her face, and then her eyes shifted to the woman sitting next to him, and her smile somehow grew even wider. She gave a little wave. Marcus watched his daughter, his heart full to bursting. For years, he had lived his life trying to be invisible, trying to avoid mistakes, trying to never give anyone a reason to question his character. But that night, the night of the gala, he had made a different choice, a dangerous choice. He had stepped out of the shadows and allowed himself to be seen. And somehow, against all odds, it had led him here, to a life that was fuller and richer than he had allowed himself to imagine, to a friendship that had bridged the vast chasm of class and race, to this moment, sitting in the front row, watching his daughter shine, with a friend by his side. Maybe the world wasn't fair. Maybe it never would be. But he had learned that it wasn't entirely devoid of grace either. There were still people who could see past the uniform, past the assumptions, past the color of his skin. There were people who could see the value in a man, not by the car he drove, but by the integrity of his heart and the brilliance of his mind. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. From invisible to unforgettable, Marcus Thorne proved that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you everything. If you believe in stories about everyday heroes, please like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that integrity still matters.